In recent years, the foundational values of free speech and open inquiry have increasingly come under assault at America's colleges and universities. Limits on speech and expression have become ingrained in campus culture, largely due to supersized campus policies intended to regulate conduct.
Beyond a simple free speech issue, this type of censorship affects the academic environment. When campus culture prevents students and researchers from participating in spirited debate or pursuing original research, the very purpose of the university, the quest for truth, is at risk.
So, it got us thinking, what if there was a way to protect free speech and free inquiry on America's college campuses? A popular proposal goes something like this. What if we just cut off all public funds, including student aid, to institutions judged to limit constitutionally protected speech? Well, there are problems with this approach. First, restricting federal funds like student aid unfairly harms students financially and limits future students' educational access. Second, it gives the federal government far too much power over the choices of individual institutions and invites bureaucratic meddling. And third, it compromises the value we place on a wide array of colleges with different cultures.
Alternatively, a better approach recognizes that colleges and universities are not just places of classroom learning. They are also research enterprises, generously supported with taxpayer funds. Since World War II, the federal government has used colleges and universities as subcontractors, dispersing billions annually for research in medicine, defense, energy, and much more. From the beginning, these grants and contracts have been funded with the expectation that institutions receiving taxpayer dollars would adhere to the tenets of responsible science, including the assurance that research questions, methods, and reporting would be guided by an unwavering commitment to free inquiry.
As Vannevar Bush explained in a 1945 report to President Harry Truman, the freedom of inquiry must be preserved under any plan for government support of science. Likewise, in a 1948 speech that gave rise to the National Science Foundation, President Truman himself defended the necessity of academic free inquiry, stating the scientific method is characterized by open-mindedness, honesty, perseverance, and, above all, by an unflinching passion for knowledge and truth. Underlying this subcontracting relationship was the assumption that institutions of higher ed would respect and defend the freedom to pursue the truth wherever it may lead.
Traditionally, the fear has revolved around government interference into academia. In their famed 1915 General Declaration of Principles, the American Association of University Professors, led then by John Dewey, asserted that the university must be an inviolable refuge from the tyranny of public opinion, stating, "It is precisely this function of the university which is most injured by any restriction upon academic freedom."
Today, however, it's often universities themselves that pose a threat to free speech and free inquiry. On its own, this imbalance is a problem for robust debate around important questions regarding race relations, immigration, social policy, and much more. After all, researchers, like anyone else, can fall prey to confirmation bias. And the more ideologically uniform a research environment, the greater the risk of that bias going unrecognized, being reinforced, and of ultimately tainting results. But even more worrisome is when such ideological uniformity is reflected in formal campus policies and practices that stifle free speech and debate. Many campus speech policies are unconstitutionally overbroad, hopelessly vague, and enable viewpoint discrimination. For example, Middlebury College's general conduct standards state that behavior that demonstrates contempt for the generally accepted values of the intellectual community is prohibited. Such policies have created a chilling effect on campuses, where in one survey, 54% of students reported that they have stopped themselves from sharing an opinion in class at some point since they began college because they were fearful of what classmates would say.
So, how do we protect campus speech from government and the academy all at once? The United States distributes nearly $40 billion a year in research funds to colleges and universities. Now, while that number pales in comparison to the roughly $160 billion that Washington distributes to higher education for student aid, Federal research funds constitute some of the most prized dollars in academia. Put simply, Washington should require that universities protect free speech and inquiry to get access to federal research funding. It makes sense. Universities have an incentive to get federal dollars, and the federal government has an incentive to get honest research for taxpayer funds.
So we propose the following. Only colleges and universities that allow all constitutionally protected speech would be eligible to receive federal research funds. Schools which receive federal research funds would have to sign a contract binding them to protect free speech and free inquiry on campus to the best of their ability. Schools that fail to honor their assurances may be subject to forfeit the remainder of the federal research funds they receive and could become ineligible for future federal research funding.
Note, we are not telling colleges and universities that they can't have restrictive speech codes that suit their ideological slant. However, when it comes to research funded by taxpayers, it is important that institutions are committed to open inquiry and create environments where hypotheses can be generated and research questions can be pursued freely, regardless of the feathers they ruffle or the feelings they hurt.
Why will this policy work? Well, first of all, colleges and universities are risk averse. They would be likely to comply with federal directives, much as they did with the Obama administration's informal guidance on Title IX, simply because they like to minimize the number of hassles that they wind up involved with. But more importantly, this policy would also put pressure on schools to create an environment that retains the best students and researchers in the natural and applied sciences. Today, it is students and faculty in the social sciences who are most likely to demand speech codes, while their quieter peers in other fields often go along for the ride. But in an environment where research funding is linked to free speech, universities just might see top-notch faculty in the hard sciences start to speak up or depart for universities that are now eligible to receive federal research funds. Our policy would level the playing field between activism and free inquiry on campus by giving serious researchers and administrators skin in the free speech game.
Of course, we're not suggesting that we couldn't also explore other remedies, political or otherwise. But by insisting that colleges abide by their historic ideals, we might just nudge the balance of power on campus back towards those seeking the unrestrained pursuit of truth.
What do you think can be done to protect free inquiry on campus? Let us know in your comments. Also, let us know what other topics you'd like our scholars to address in the What If series. And be sure to like and subscribe for more research and videos from AEI.